Hey y'all, welcome to Prepper Friday. I'm Madden from Self-Reliance Publishing, and today we're going to continue our series on living off the land in the city. Today we're going to be talking about utilizing small game as a food source in the city, and primarily we're going to talk about trapping small game. Because when it comes to using small game as a food source, hunting is generally not your best option, because if you go out specifically to hunt small game, a lot of times you're going to burn more calories in the process of hunting that game than you will actually gain in harvesting the animals themselves. Small game hunting is a lot of fun, and it's a great way to practice your skills and get out in the woods, and I personally enjoy small game hunting. But if you're doing it for subsistence purposes, going out specifically to hunt small games probably not the best, probably not your best bet. A much better option is going to be trapping, because trapping is more of a passive activity. You can go out and set numerous traps all at one time, and those traps can be working for you 24 hours, and then you go out and run your trap line again the following day and collect your catch. And it is a much more efficient way at putting small game on the table. So what I have in front of me is a 110 conibear trap. If you're not familiar with conibear traps or just trapping in general, these conibears are a killing type trap. You set them up like so, and when the animal comes in and sticks its snout on these whiskers here, the trap will snap back on the animal and snap its neck and cut off its ability to breathe, killing the animal immediately. And they're very effective traps for small game, such as squirrels, rabbits, muskrats, and the like. And I would highly recommend that you pick up a dozen of them or so and get familiar with their use. I'll probably do a series at some point in time about trapping in general, and cover different types of steel traps, both foothold and these conibears, and probably box traps. So I will do a series at some point specifically about trapping, but I want to point that out here. They do have a lot of advantages. Like I said, they're very effective. They dispatch the animal for you, so you don't have to do that. If you kill an animal, it's not going to move around and call attention to itself, so you're less likely to have that animal taken from you, because it's less likely to get noticed by a passerby. Downside to using the conibear traps are if you're in an area where you have the potential of catching a non-target animal, this trap doesn't discriminate and it will kill that non-target animal. So that might be a potential downside. Another downside is during the summer months or when it's warm out. If you kill an animal and it sits there for several hours, by the time you come back around to it, that meat might be spoiled and you're not able to eat it. So conibear is definitely not the perfect trap. It has its place, and I recommend you have some, but it's not the only trap you need. For small game, a live box trap would be a good option to have as well. I don't currently have any real small box traps that are made for squirrel and rabbit sized animals, but I do have a few for medium sized game, and based off of what I have for the medium sized game, I would not recommend the Have a Heart brand. They seem to be a little bit flimsy from what I've seen. I actually do have one and wasn't super impressed with the construction of it. I do have a few Duke box traps, and Duke kind of gets a bad name, and there's probably higher quality coil spring traps out there than Duke's, but I've been very impressed with their box traps. I'm happy with them. I've got a couple, and when I do go back to buy some small game box traps, that's what I'll buy. I think they have a version that's 7 inches by 7 inches by 24 inch is long, and that would be about ideal for squirrel sized game. And using those box traps would allow you to let a non-target animal go if you catch something that you're not intending to catch, and it keeps the animal alive until you get there. So during a hot summer month, that the meat's not going to spoil because you're going to be the one to dispatch it. So the downsides to it are you do have to dispatch that animal, and if that animal is alive, they'll move around, can make noise and whatnot, and catch the attention of other people who have the potential to steal not only your animal that you've caught, but also potentially your trap. Those box traps are larger and just more likely to catch people's attention anyways. And when you have a live animal in them, they're that much more likely to get noticed. So those would be some downsides to the box trap. I would recommend, like I said, you pick up maybe a dozen of these 110 conibear traps and maybe 2 or 3 of the box traps, and that would be plenty as far as small game traps go. I would also recommend that you become familiar with some primitive trapping techniques, some different snares that you can make using improvised materials, as well as different deadfalls. Primitive trapping is a difficult skill to acquire. It takes a decent amount of practice and time to develop that skill, but that's knowledge that you have, and knowledge and skills can't be taken away from you. So these traps can get stolen from you, but if you have, and they can break, but if you have the knowledge to build primitive traps, then you'll always be able to put food on the table utilizing that knowledge. So I would recommend that you do invest some time, and I will do a series at some point in time on different primitive traps. So that's my take on trapping small game. Like I said, going out specifically to hunt small game is probably not the best use of your time and your energy, but if a opportunity presents itself, if an animal runs across you when you're going about your daily life, you might want to be prepared to take that game and take advantage of the opportunity that presents itself. If it's in your own backyard and you're able to use a firearm or firearm looking device without calling attention to yourself, you can use a .22 with CB caps, and if you shoot CB caps out of a rifle, they're very quiet and your neighbors aren't going to be able to hear it, but they are not very quiet coming out of a pistol. So you don't want to be lugging that .22 rifle around when you go about your life off of your property, because the rifle itself will call attention to yourself. And since the CB caps don't work out of a pistol, that's not really an option to you. A better way, in my mind, would be to become familiar with some primitive weapons like rabbit sticks, blowguns, or slings, or something of that nature, and become familiar with, practice with a few of them, and pick your favorite one to practice and really master. And that way you're able to take game with a primitive weapon, and that does a couple of things for you. It kind of goes back to the primitive trapping thing. That's a skill that can't be taken away from you. So if you have the knowledge to produce a primitive weapon and you have the knowledge to use a primitive weapon, even if what you have is taken away from you, you have the ability to replicate that and use it to put food on the table. So that's valuable knowledge to have. In addition to that, most primitive weapons aren't readily identifiable, except for maybe a bow and arrow being an exception to that. So you can walk around town carrying your primitive weapon and no one's going to know what you have. And you can use that weapon with no one watching and it doesn't make any noise, and you can take that game without alerting anybody of your presence or your activities. So in that regard, I do believe that primitive weapons are a valuable skill to have. So that's my take on small game. You're better off trapping them than you are hunting them. I'll come out with some more material about trapping, both those steel traps and primitive traps. I currently have some videos out there about primitive weapons, and I'll be producing more videos about primitive weapons. As always, I appreciate every like, every comment, and every subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.